During the 12-day war, such as it was with Iran, the US and Israel versus Iran, bombing on all sides, there are a bunch of Israeli Defense Force officers in the Pentagon that week. And during that week, ask anyone who works at the Pentagon, they enraged American Pentagon staff by just barging into meetings, giving orders, making demands, and nobody did anything about it.
Well, that's not good. In fact, Tucker Carlson engaged in a lengthy monologue about the toxicity of this US-Israel alliance. And that was just one example that he pointed to in regard to that toxicity. And as you just heard him explain, Israeli soldiers were apparently bossing American officials around in the Pentagon during the 12-day war in Iran. And that is humiliating for the United States. We shouldn't be taking orders from officials from any other foreign government either. But we have that special relationship with Israel, so this just kind of goes on and it's unchecked. And I think it's unacceptable, so does Tucker Carlson. It's one of the things that we agree with each other on. So as a result, Carlson has suggested that President Donald Trump is rapidly losing patience with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government, which I find dubious to say the least. And I can explain why in a moment. But recently, Trump did declare that he would not allow Israel to annex the West Bank, which Carlson believes was his response to Netanyahu's claims that he controls the United States government. Take a look.
I think the good news is that the government of Israel, in particular, the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has pushed it too far. And he did that in part by running around telling people what he thought was true, apparently. I control Donald Trump. I control the United States Congress. I control the United States. He said that to political allies and opponents in his country. He said it to foreign heads of state. Fact. I control these people. Don't you worry. And by the way, if you kick me out of office, the next guy probably won't have the level of control that I have. He's made that case. That was too much for our president. And so in one of the great moments, it was just, it was a cool shower on a hot day. President Trump pushed back, not directly, but you can watch this clip and see that he's had enough.
I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. No, I will not allow it. It's not going to happen.
Did you speak with Netanyahu about this?
Yeah, but I'm not going to allow it.
Now look, for me, talk is cheap, and I see President Donald Trump as the kayfabe president. If you don't know what kayfabe is, look into it. It's a wrestling term. It's theater. He will say things publicly, but do something entirely different in his actions, right? So it remains to be seen whether Trump is actually going to push back against the Israeli government when it comes to the annexation of the West Bank, because let's not forget, he collected a cool $100 million from Miriam Adelson in order to step back and allow Israel to annex the West Bank. So I'm not just going to take his word for it. I'm gonna wait and see if Trump is actually going to walk the walk or if he's just engaging in more of the kayfabe theater that we typically expect from this administration. But nonetheless, Carlson's monologue, which was titled 4 Ways to Fix America's Deeply Destructive and Humiliating Relationship with Israel, makes some interesting suggestions, most of which I actually agree with. Now, his first suggestion was for Americans to recognize how Israel's pretty insignificant when it comes to the United States and its own geopolitical goals. Take a look.
The United States is a nation of 350 million people. It has some of the deepest natural resources in the world. That would include energy and water, agricultural products. The United States, however it's managed, is a powerhouse globally and always will be because its strength is inherent. It's a huge, decisive country. Israel is not an insult, merely an observation. By contrast, is a tiny and inherently insignificant country, at least geopolitically, in that it has only 9 million people and no natural resources, no meaningful natural resources. So it is insignificant. It is also physically tiny. It's about the size of New Jersey, famously, but it has a much smaller GDP than New Jersey.
Come on, that's a little bit unfair. I hear Israel's actually huge when it comes to the diamond trade. You should look into that, by the way, and see how exactly they are so big in the diamond trade. But nonetheless, obviously I'm being facetious in what I'm saying here. But nonetheless, I look, it's a harsh way of putting it, but it's actually true. In terms of the natural resources, the influence over the globe, the importance geopolitically, calling Israel insignificant is gonna piss a lot of people off. I get it, I totally get it, but he's not wrong. And so as a result, he suggests that the United States stop taking orders from Israel. Take a look at that.
The true villain here, I would argue, is not the state of Israel, the Jews. It's the United States. It's our leaders who are putting up with this. Israel is a small country with very limited resources, and it is doing its best to serve its own interests. You'd think every country would act that way, and most do. But there are some that don't, and ours would top that list. You can't be shamed into ignoring things that are quite clearly not the behavior of a subordinate ally to a big brother ally. For example, spying on the country that makes your economy and your defense possible, which the Israelis have been doing for generations. That's a fact.
That is a fact. In fact, hundreds of Israeli spies were arrested and detained following the horrific terrorist attack on September 11th, 2001. They were spying in the United States, on domestic soil. If that is our ally, how do you justify the spying that's taking place? And by the way, the United States spies on Israel as well. I'm not stupid, I know that that's true. That sounds like a pretty toxic relationship. And look, the point that Tucker Carlson's making here is true. How exactly does it benefit American citizens to, for instance, spend $30 billion on Israel's annihilation of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip? How does that benefit us, especially at a time when we just had Medicaid funds slashed to the tune of $1 trillion over the next decade? What are we paying our taxes for? And why are we borrowing money at a time when we have an insane amount of federal debt to pay for Israel's weaponry as they carry out atrocities and war crimes in Gaza and the West Bank? How does this make any sense? He's right. If you take your emotions out of it and just look at the facts, this is not beneficial for the American people at all. So let's talk about some of the specific things that Carlson thinks need to change in order to repair this toxic alliance and relationship we have with Israel. He talks about the issue of dual citizenship. I differ from him on this a little bit, so let's watch what he has to say and I'll explain what I mean.
The third thing I think that would be very helpful to restore health and balance to the relationship between the United States and Israel is restore the concept of citizenship in the United States. If you're an American citizen, it means something. The first thing it means is equality. You are equal to every other citizen. There's no hierarchy of citizenship. All citizens are equal. Each gets one vote. Each gets justice before the law. That's the promise of the United States, and each gets to say exactly what he thinks, period. Restore the value of citizenship. And the very first thing you would do if you cared about that, and you should, because the country can't continue without it, after you expelled everyone who's not a citizen from the country, which should happen immediately. They should be deported immediately for our own survival. But after doing that, the first thing you would do is not allow dual citizenship. And moreover, you are not allowed to serve in a foreign military without losing your American citizenship. You're fighting for another country? How can that be allowed? How can you retain your citizenship? By the way, why aren't you serving in our military? And AIPAC has to register under FARE, the Foreign Agent Registration Act of the 1930s. Of course, it's a foreign lobby. There are a million of them. But it's only AIPAC that doesn't register.
I agree with him when it comes to AIPAC entirely. I'm not even gonna dive into that at all because I'm totally aligned with Tucker Carlson on that issue. I do want to talk about deporting all people who are here without documented status, right? Look, I just see that as extreme, and I'm not opposed to deporting some folks, but I also want to implement a process so people have a pathway to citizenship. Because I don't think an undocumented person who's been in the country for many years and has been working and contributing to American society should be treated the same as someone who, came into the country illegally or overstayed their visa and they've been here for a few months or a few years. I just think there's some nuance in that issue that's kind of being thrown out the window. However, his argument about the value of being an American citizen is important to just weigh in on here. I agree with him. I think that American citizenship is devalued to some extent. I do find it incredibly problematic that we do not have any laws right now preventing dual citizens from serving in Congress or in government roles. So when I say dual citizen, I'm not just talking about individuals who have American citizenship and Israeli citizenship or Israel citizenship. I'm talking about anyone who is serving in the federal government, anyone who's a public servant, period, having dual citizenship because it's a conflict of interest. It's not that difficult. So for me, that would be the priority. If you're an ordinary private American and you have dual citizenship, I actually think he's making a pretty strong argument here. But I'm willing to look the other way when it comes to ordinary private Americans having dual citizenship. But when it comes to public servants, that's an entirely different question, entirely. You can't have that conflict of interest. And by the way, I also agree. If you are willing to serve in a foreign government's military, but unwilling to serve in our own military, it's a little sus, little sus. So I also agree with him on that. You either have a stake in the game or not. You either want to improve this country, fight for this country, protect this country, or not. You can't have that type of conflict of interest playing a role in how you behave. If you're willing to go fight in a foreign government's military, but not our own, I just find that so strange. So I think he makes a strong case there as well. And finally, look, he wants to kind of clear the record on Christianity, and he wants Christians to get their theology right, as he puts it. So I want to go to the last video and then we'll end here.
And the last thing that I think we need to do to restore balance between the relationship between the United States and Israel and to restore some sanity to the public conversation on this topic is to get our theology right. And this is not a message aimed at Israelis or Jews. This is a message aimed at Christians, who are the largest group of Israel supporters in the United States. And their view of Israel is colored not just by sentimental attachment, which is fine, or trips to Israel, great, no problem, but by a Christian heresy, the oldest of the Christian heresies, which is that God somehow prefers some people based on their DNA. And of course, the whole point of Christianity is that that is no longer true, that there is no chosen people. The chosen people are people who choose Jesus. That is the Christian message right there. It's not an anti-Semitic message, by the way.
So look, there's obviously a huge disagreement when it comes to evangelicals who are Christian Zionists versus the type of Christians that I grew up with who didn't believe in what Christian Zionists believe and didn't believe in this weird apocalyptic outcome where there's a second coming of Christ and anyone who's Jewish and converted to Christianity will be saved. Anyone who refuses to do so will burn in eternal damnation. Like, I wasn't taught any of that stuff when I was going to Sunday school growing up. And yes, I was raised Christian. And so that storyline of evangelical Christians being utilized and exploited in a way to benefit the foreign country of Israel is something that Tucker Carlson takes issue with, and I totally agree with him on that. Now, I'm not a practicing Christian anymore, so if you are a practicing Christian, you fall in the camp of Tucker Carlson, I totally get the frustration of religion being used in a cynical way to support a foreign country, even as they engage in some of the most unchristian behavior you can imagine, including the slaughtering of innocent people in the West Bank and Gaza and Lebanon and other countries as well in the Middle East. Let's keep it real. Look, I don't have any hatred in my heart for Israelis. I don't even have hatred in my heart for Israel's government, right? I have a lot of anger over the fact that Americans are forced to support what the current Israeli government is carrying out. And they are in fact carrying out atrocities and genocide. And the fact that Americans are forced to be complicit in that is an injustice. I have a huge problem with that. So does Tucker Carlson, and I'm grateful that he's speaking out against it because I know all too well that you pay a price in speaking out against it. But if you love this country and you want what's best for Americans first and foremost, you do have to reevaluate our relationship and our alliance with Israel. Is it actually beneficial to the American people? Tucker Carlson doesn't think so, and neither do I. And this might be the first time in my career, in my adult life, where I've seen unity and strong agreement between members of the left and right. Something to consider. I just want the atrocities to stop. I want the public humiliation of the Americans to end. I want us to stop taking orders from any foreign government, period. And I don't think that's too much to ask for. I don't think that makes you a bad person. But let me know what you think. Share your comments. Because there's a group of people in this country who think having these views is just deeply hateful and anti-Semitic. I disagree. I think this has to do with the foreign government that is using our resources and their alliance with the United States government to carry out atrocities that we would not stand for if it was any other ally doing the same.